So we've had one sit. Let's jump right in, right? Jump in and get to the heart of the matter. What are we doing here? Why are you here? As I was saying earlier, it really struck me how much we all have in common in some ways. You know, we all have enough experience in our lives to find time pretty precious. This being something that you would choose to do with your time. Is relevant, and if you're anything like me, you might choose differently now than you have in the past how you value your time, how you spend it. I trust that we've all had a lot of challenges in our lives too, just because we've been alive long enough to not be able to avoid them. You know, some very significant, some extreme, and then just all the little daily difficulties, little things that maybe would have been distressing when we were children or teenagers, but it's kind of like we can get used to it, a little daily agitation, something that you might think you should be over by now or better at by now. Sometimes that's the way we treat people, or, you know, just how calm we feel inside ourselves. And then how fortunate to have these peaceful periods where you get to do something like this, to intentionally focus on introspection, self-improvement. And then another reason for many people why they choose to come do something like this is a sense of connectedness, you know, wanting to be with people, wanting to experience what you already know is available, being with other people who care about the practice or are drawn to discover something similarly to the way you're drawn. And these broad categories, these types of reasons that bring you here, what brings anyone to practice, they're referred to in Buddhism as the 3 marks of existence. That's impermanence, time, unsatisfactoriness, there always being something that I want, something that's just, if something was just like this, like then maybe everything would be fine, even minus huge disruptions. There may be always an itch in the mind. And corelessness, like an apple with no core. But see, that reflects to that third thing I said about being connected. So it doesn't mean non-existent, it means existent relative to others, relative to everything else. So these words, you know, in English, they can have kind of a connotation that makes people not want to get into them. Sometimes it's could be seen to be a messaging problem, being so direct about something that people don't want to look into. Words like impermanence and unsatisfactoriness. No, we want, you know, peace and happiness and focus and, and all of those things are available too, but avoiding something that is true and has unavoidable implications, avoiding that offers such shallow relief. Like not going to the doctor if you think something is wrong, like not treating a curable disease. That kind of relief is what can be had by not turning toward things. But this analogy only goes so far because, yes, if you find that you have a disease that's completely curable and turns out you just needed some antibiotics and some fluids, then, you can get well. This has so much more depth and breadth and weight than that, turning toward these things that are so normal to want to avoid, the fact that things end and change, the fact that sometimes our skin doesn't seem to fit quite right. The fact that there are connections where sometimes it seems like it would be nice to just be able to be independent. But turning towards these things is exactly where the freedom is in practice that people talk about. Not resisting what is there to be known, but opening to it. And that's what we'll be talking about all week this week. These 3 marks of existence and the things that get in the way and the very straightforward approaches that meditation has to offer. So this week, each day we'll talk about every night too, so it'll be fresh. These suggestions about how to look for these marks intentionally, to come to see them more as friends and definitely not as enemies. Sometimes the side of them that you don't want to see will present itself regardless, but if it doesn't, you can always look for the friendly sides of it, like, when you're going outside and you see the trees moving and the birds flying. This is constant change, constant change, constant change, just noticing that. If you notice that you have a sitting posture that you regret, if you notice that, there's something for lunch that's not quite right, or the timing means that you're hungrier than you're comfortable with, these are ways that you can notice, oh, that's just unsatisfactoriness. That's normal. It's a normal part of life. And instead of resisting that, trying to not notice it, trying to get away from it somehow, you have that opportunity to turn toward it, to notice where you feel it in your body, what it's like in your mind. And this interconnectedness will, you can think of it like that. This is referred to also as corelessness or emptiness, but it's also just the fact of everything here, the way in which we are one thing. So there are ways in which we are 7 things, and there are ways in which we are one thing. And you can notice how the others that we're sitting with, how their actions impact you, how your actions impact them. Noticing that if you're able to get coffee, it's because Alan prepared it for you. Noticing that if you place your shoes in a certain way, that there's room for someone else to place theirs. These are these small ways that you can look for on purpose these 3 marks of existence and soften that resistance that tends to be innate for people. Softening the resistance is a way to help drop into understandings of those marks of existence that are a little less obvious. Plenty of time, days, to do this. So impermanence again, I know just by the fact that everyone in this room is over 50 that you've experienced some loss. You've experienced impermanence. We've probably all considered our own mortality. Sometimes these 3 marks are also noted that meditators tend to notice one more easily or more strongly than another. So for some people, this impermanence may come up strongly as something that is easier to notice or carries a lot of angst with it. That's what it means if it's a gate for somebody, is that you're drawn to consider it over and over, or noticing that you're repelled by it over and over. For others, the gate might be this gate of unsatisfactoriness. If for some people, this awareness of some kind of background discomfort is always there. For everybody, it's acute at times, when something blows up in life. But for some people, it's always noticeable. And if you relate to that, maybe this week, if I would wish for one thing for you, it would be to consider yourself fortunate that you have that gate, that opening, to see so clearly a suffering that is so difficult for many people to see. Because it's just innate, it's a part of being human to have this consciousness that wants to go from here to there and wants to be more comfortable and wants to be smarter and younger or immortal, or have their kids be immortal perhaps, or not come to any harm. For some people that's just more present than for others, and then it's fortunate if you're able to embrace that rather than resist it. And then the 3rd main gate again is this corelessness. You've probably all heard that referred to as emptiness, and so it's important to note that this potentially negative connotation that word emptiness can have is not nihilistic, it's not non-existence. It just means that I'm not in charge of everything, including my own life. I don't get to decide what my genetic code is. I don't know so many things that are going to happen tomorrow that are going to change the way we do things. This corelessness, we'll talk about each of these in more depth this week, but it's just this recognition of interdependence of everything, interdependence of everything. So when I put it nicely like that, it's funny that it's so hard to see, isn't it? Sounds kind of obvious, but we'll get into a little bit why that is too. I think it's really interesting. So I want to say why it matters. Why does it matter that we need to talk about these things? There's a few different reasons that I thought of. One is that, that I mentioned earlier, that you just can't get relief from them until you turn toward it. So, say our friend here who has this scar on his face, he can turn away from that skin cancer all he wants, but if he doesn't turn toward it, it's not going to go away. And it's going to get worse. It's going to get more uncomfortable. And so that relief, the deep relief, is a reason to talk about it. And then the flip side, it's not, this is another thing that I think sometimes people turn away from this idea of suffering at the core of Buddhism as though it's, something negative, but I think it's really just so direct. It's just saying, well, this is just how the thing is. And then if we stay with that a minute, we hear next that, and when you look through that, there is this opportunity for a profound clarity and wisdom and a sense of freedom, profound transformation that can happen sometimes very suddenly and sometimes over and over in a person's life when they're dedicated to practice. There can be not only a growing calm and intellectual understanding, less reactivity in relationships, these things happen also, but there can also be, and often is, in dedicated practitioners, these insights when you have experiences of knowing things like these marks of existence in just a more complete way, seeing suddenly it could be consciously, but I hesitate because sometimes you can't even put your finger on the thing that happened when you have an aha moment that's related to practice. And there's a common metaphor in these teachings that say it's like, instead of pruning, which is what we all normally do who care about our behavior, we try to be good, we try to, improve ourselves, be nice to people, do appropriate things. And meditation offers this opportunity to get things much, much deeper than pruning, getting whole branches and sometimes roots that upend confusion in every area of your life all at once. The potential in this practice is so much greater than just, than only being self-assured and being non-reactive and having good focus. So I just don't want anyone to sell it short. So I mentioned two things. Why does it matter? There is relief, but there is also this profound fulfillment that's available. But then another reason too then is that we do have clear ways to approach this. This isn't just like, well, just sit down and be quiet and do the best you can. There are prescribed paths. so that these transformations are not unavailable to anyone. They're available to anyone, absolutely anyone who has the good fortune to be exposed. And for some reason, often through some kind of suffering, becomes open enough to say, what the heck, I think I'm going to check it out. And the sincerity and the resolve that one puts into that, that's the degree to which it works out. It's very straightforward. And as we talk this week too, we'll, talk about one-on-one. We can talk about techniques at meals. We'll talk about some techniques. We'll do some guided practice before dinner, and practice seeing things in a way that's useful, that takes you where you want to, where your real heart's desire is. So as you know, it's not easy. That's the other thing we're doing here, right? If this was something anybody could do with an app, then you could stay home. So one of the reasons this is challenging is something that has been called the three poisons. The three poisons are a way of naming the kinds of patterns that are innate to people and prevent us from easily seeing the three marks of existence. And it's just like there's just existence. This isn't like naming something that nobody thought of before. It's just like there's life, there's existence, and you can cut it up in 5 pieces and call it this. You can cut it up in 2 pieces and call it that. So this is just one way of describing life or the nature of things, to say that you could say that the trouble people have with seeing things as they are is because of these patterns of ignorance, aversion, and attachment. That's like a Buddhist perspective, but you could name any number of perspectives. Doesn't matter to me which one, but this is one that I like, that makes sense to me. And, and this too, these words can be turnoffs to people. They can be reasons that, people want to do a practice that they think is going to be more cheerful. And a cheerful practice can give some temporary happiness and relief, but it, can't get at the heart of the disease. It cannot get at the heart of the disease. And that's really what we're after. It's like, let's turn towards the thing and see through it once and for all. So these characteristics too, it's especially, people in our culture, I think, can tend to be so hard on themselves, as if you could possibly know everything, which no one does, as if you could possibly not want to avoid something that's unpleasant or hurts you. It's like, of course you have aversion, and the same with attachment. Of course we would like to be more comfortable than uncomfortable. Of course it's difficult to see people that we love suffering. Of course it's, painful to consider that something might be wrong with our kids. Those are all pretty deep level attachments, not to mention the more superficial ones, like, if you'd rather scroll on Instagram or watch YouTube than do your taxes or something, like, that's both attachment and aversion. But these things that they call the 3 poisons are really useful to just notice, so that we can loosen up around those too. These opportunities will come up over and over and over this week, with this stillness and structure and quiet. Every time you feel a discomfort, you can check and notice, you know, there's no way to have a discomfort and not be able to notice something about it that, I mean, sometimes it might be neutral if you watch it for a minute, but immediately, most likely, there will be I don't want that, or I'm uncomfortable because I want to, and I'm not getting what I want right now. These are also just an introduction, so we're going to get into more of this week, but this is just setting up our week to consider how you might notice these things. Like, oh yeah, I can see, how these get in the way. What's going to be valuable here is, and here I mean this week, staying here, doing a retreat, is this opportunity to get under the surface level. It's any of us who, just care about trying to not waste our time and not be mean to people, pretty normal ways of wanting to be a decent person. It's easy on this surface level to see things like, oh, if I don't get enough sleep, I'm irritable, or, I was so tired and it made me want to, have a snack, and then I felt different. And those are helpful insights to have too. And with these days of quiet, this opportunity to notice more, you'll probably be able to see much further in the direction of any one of those discomforts than you've been able to see before, if you just stay with it. And personally, I've found it not hard, which shocked me when I started meditating. When I started retreating, at least, when I started going on retreats, I thought the food thing would be hard. I thought all the sitting would be hard, and physically the sitting was hard. But I was surprised to find out that I wasn't as averse to my own psychic discomfort as I thought. It was just that I never had the time. I think I always felt like I can't afford to, really dissolve into my own, whatever it was, insecurity or paranoia or whatever it was, that day, because I have to do this thing right now. It was just too self-indulgent. But funny how the story I told myself was that I wouldn't be able to sit with it. And, where do we get things like that? Just deciding in advance something that's unkind towards yourself, that is disapproving. So you may find that you can embrace that opportunity and notice if something's been weighing on you, if you're sitting and you suddenly remember a sadness or an anger. You don't have to go anywhere else this time. You don't have to shake it off so you can make the next good decision at work. You don't have to stuff it so you can be cheerful with the person you live with. You can sit all the way through something, maybe for the first time. Yeah, I came across a couple of words recently. Do you know this word, exoteric? I was taking a class, and I was never an academic, so all these PhDs are teaching these classes, and I was like, what? Exoteric? I've heard of esoteric, but they kept talking about exoteric. So exoteric being, more like the opposite. We think of esoteric, I believe, as, being really subtle or some kind of difficult to understand. And I really loved this contrast because exoteric is simply what is more obvious and what can be taught and learned alone from a book, from an app, from an online seminar. And you can get a lot of help, therapeutic help, mindfulness, a lot of help in modes like that in the exoteric realm. And you will also find those benefits here. Meditators do too in meditation retreats. They might get an accelerated benefit from doing so much meditation in the exoteric realm. And then there is the opportunity for that esoteric. But I don't mean, something magical or religious when I say esoteric. I just mean the thing that you have wanted to get to and didn't know how. And all you needed was some quiet and some structure and some connection. So there's a perspective I like to offer about practice that I've been talking about for a long time that I call threads to the absolute, and it helps, tie these ideas together too, how whatever we want to call them, exoteric and esoteric, or, the obvious and the subtle, so that you'll be able to experience this week and start really noticing, maybe start feeling an excitement and an open heart toward even your difficulties and frustrations and irritations, because all of those not only can be helpful to your practice, they are what allows you to practice. They are the threads. They are the threads. There is no other way. They are the threads that lead you exactly where you want to go. So this threads to the absolute. This is, let's see if, oops, there it is. So whether it's a distraction, anything that you notice while you're eating, doing your seva jobs, this, I brought this thread out. Everybody can see I have this spool of thread, but it's wonderful everybody's sitting so far away from me because I bet it's hard to see. Can you see the thread between my fingers and the spool? Yeah, you can easily imagine not being able to see it. Kind of like believe me that I have the end. But we know that, whatever's way up here in my fingers, this is only here because of this. This is not here without this whole spool of thread. And what this, exoteric level that people settle for in their practice is just like way up here. And it's also what we're so hard on ourselves for, like, oh, this is terrible, I need to get rid of this thread, it's like ruining my life. And it's like this, it's this, but it's not bad. It's like follow it. Anything that comes up, Like, I still have this resentment from when I was 12 years old. It's like, oh yeah? Where do you feel that in your body? Do you notice it changing? Impermanence. Do you notice trying to pull away from it? Unsatisfactoriness. Do you notice that you are connected to that memory? Corelessness. Seeing through these things, getting all the way down. So following these things, I did want to mention, we don't mean going down rabbit holes of thinking. So it's not about obsessive thinking, it's about paying attention. You're coming back over and over to, how does this feel right now? What do I notice about how it feels? What do I notice about what is in my mind? Not what do I think happened, not what do I think will happen, not what do I regret, but what do I see right now? And that's the cushion part. You're welcome to write things in a journal if that seems like it would be helpful to flesh something out. I've done lots and lots and lots of that myself. Sometimes you will discover, probably even this week, suddenly being more present, suddenly noticing one of these 3 marks of existence that you thought was so obvious, and yet you see it in a new way. You'll know because it's like time stops for a moment and there's something like a gasp, and realizing that you don't know how to talk about it because it's so simple. And that's just what we call an insight. And those are very common and they're transformative. They're very common and they're extraordinary. They're things that I hardly ever run across people who aren't meditators who have that experience. And it changes the way you see and act in the world for the better. So, these frameworks we'll be talking about for the next several days. The idea, my hope, is to kind of blow on the flame of your desire to make the most of your time here, to encourage that, as well as, throughout the day, not just sitting here. Hoping that, the concepts that we talk about will sink in and be a deep experience that you feel and that you know differently than you can express rationally. And so I want to show you this wall hanging that I love, that I keep in my bedroom. I saw this in a woman's house a long time ago. See if I can remember when. More than 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. And I had taken my oldest child over there because my mindfulness teacher was kind of like tutoring my oldest child. It was a funny thing. They had an affinity for math and different concepts. But this woman had this artwork in her bathroom that I loved. And so I went on the search for it and got one for myself. It says, "Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes and opportunity is lost. Each of us should strive to awaken, awaken, awaken. Take heed. Do not squander your life." There's just nothing that I would rather see every day, that's what I'm doing here. And maybe each of you will reflect on too, what am I really doing here? What am I really doing here? And maybe it's the same and maybe it's different, but this is the time. We have so much good quiet and structure for you to come toward whatever your heart's desire is. So doing this, going for this, it takes more than showing up. It does take some effort. And, but it's not brute force effort. It's opening. It's opening and softening and allowing this quiet and structure to seep into your system and help settle. Your main job would be to maybe keep noticing if you're losing consciousness or, mind wandering, and try to come back. That takes effort. And then your attentiveness will grow a lot. Everything you want to know is hidden in plain sight, and you have everything you need right here, especially because now you have each other, because now there are people, and this noble company is the number one thing, in my opinion, that people miss when they're trying to make progress on a spiritual path without having really honest, direct interactions and an embrace of this vulnerability and earnestness about the practice. It's almost impossible for a person to get outside of their own previously conceived thoughts naturally, because we have our history and our memories and our experiences. And now you have each other and you have this place. So please practice as though you know this will work for you. And if so, you will find that you trust this more and more as you come to see for yourself that it is working. So I'll end with a poem for you. I did go pretty long, I thought I would. And then we'll just sit for a few minutes, and I hope very much that you've heard something tonight that will inspire you to a strong start. It's a very, very old poem. This book is called The First Free Women, Poems of the Early Buddhist Nuns, extremely early. For years I couldn't sleep. Most nights I'd throw off the covers and take long runs through the dark. Nothing helped. My friends, when sleepless nights come to tear you into little pieces, rise to meet the day, as a tree rises to meet the axe, as a scalp bows to meet the blade, as sparks from a dying fire reach out to meet the darkness, as all of our bones someday fall softly down to meet earth. When you stand, send your roots down between the stones. When you walk, walk like a skeleton walking to its grave. When you lie down like a blown-out candle being put back in a drawer. When you sit, sit very, very still. My friends, sit like you are dead already. How could this world possibly give you what you're looking for when it's so busy falling apart, just like you? Look closely. Don't move until you see it.